In this video, I'll show you how to use the new context feature in Tracer version 3 Visual for Power BI. In this case, we have two different models loaded into Power BI. One is an architectural model and one is a structural model. We'd like to set one of those models so that it appears as ghosted so that the other can be the primary model that is featured. The first thing that we need to do in order to set this up is to transform our data and add a column to determine what's context and what's not context. If I scroll over, you'll see that there is a column for model. This is a designation number where one of the models is getting a number 1 for each line of data and the other is getting a number 2. We can add a column by first clicking on Add Column, and we'll want to select Conditional Column so that we can set up a function where one of these model designations is set as context and one is not. So we'll select Conditional Column. We can add a custom column name. In this case, is context makes sense. And we'll say if model designation equals 1, then 0 or false. And else if model equals 2 for the second model, then 1 for true. So this is all set. We can hit OK, and we'll see that it added a column. We can right-click on the column and select Change Type to True False. Now we have a field that will say false, it's not context, and true, it is context. If we scroll down far enough, it would take quite a while. All right, so with that, our data is transformed. We'll head back to Home and the panel above and hit Close and Apply. This will load the updated data into the model. All right, the data is loaded, and we'll see that Power BI is refreshing the data into the visual. And we can check to ensure that it's loaded in this element category. You'll see now we have this field for is context. The next step will be to take the context field and drop it into the context area for the visual. Because our first model, the architectural model, is set as false, not being context, it's going to stay looking solid. We're going to orbit around the model to see the structure coming through, and you can see that it's wireframed or ghosted into the visual. We can switch which model is considered context and which is considered the base model by going to the Format tab, the Input tab, and inverting the context. Now you can see that the architectural model is showing as ghosted or wireframed, and the structural model is showing as solid. So it has been inverted. We can change the context style below. So it's set to ghosted currently. We could change the edge color, which would help to lighten the visual. And we can also adjust the visibility. We could set it to edges only to give it that true wireframe look. So this is allowing us to see these two different models where one is set to context with different visual properties than the other. Another method of setting context would be to use something besides the model designation to set context. So let's take a look at what that would mean. We can go back to our Format panel, remove is context from this menu, and uncheck it from the Fields panel. We can go back to Transform Data, scroll over to the is context column on the element table, select this column and remove it. Select Add Column, Conditional Column, and we'll create a new isContext column. This one we can set to category. In our column names below, we'll select category, and we can say when category equals something like walls, for example, that would be shared between both models, then not context. Everything else, yes, that is context. So we will hit OK. We can right-click on this column again, change type, true, false, and return to home, and close and apply. This field, it looks like it turned back on the former isContext column, which we deleted before we went into transform data, so we can ignore this error. That was me double-clicking when I should have single-clicked. And now we can select isContext category and drop it into the context area. Now, because we have the context visual settings inverted in the Format tab, this should show where the walls are now appearing as context or wireframed, and everything else is appearing as solid. So let's invert that and see what happens. There we go. So because there's quite a bit of data appearing, it is a little difficult to see, but we can tell now that anything that is not a wall is showing up as wireframe, and anything that is a wall is showing up as solid. So those are two ways of designating context. You can repeat the same steps for other types of data that you'd like to filter as context or not context, and then control the visual appearance of what is set to context and what is set to model independently.